안녕하세요.
Night fell over Seoul, illuminated by the city's vibrant neon signs. The sharp winter chill made people hurry to their destinations, seeking refuge in cozy cafes and heated shops. Ji-eun Park walked briskly through the crowd, clutching her bag to her chest. The day had been exhausting, and all she wanted was to get home, bury herself under the covers, and forget the world. But Fator, something even crueler, had other plans for her. Feeling her throat dry, she decided to stop at a small cafe along the way. It was a discreet place, lit with warm yellow lights and filled with the inviting aroma of freshly brewed coffee. She hadn't expected to see any familiar faces. Yet, as soon as her eyes scanned the room, her body froze. Sitting near the window was Jin-woo Kang, the man who had occupied her thoughts for years. The one who was supposed to be part of her past, yet at that moment felt dangerously present. He hadn't changed much. His black hair was still perfectly styled, his dark suit impeccably tailored. There was an aura of power and control surrounding Haime's magnetic presence that made people glance his way, even if they didn't want to. But it was his gaze that hit her like a punch. Jin-woo lifted his eyes from the document he was reading and met hers. For a moment, time stopped. The chatter of customers, the sound of the coffee machine, everything faded away. Only the two of them remained, locked in a silent reunion filled with unspoken history. A shiver ran down Ji-eun's spine. Her first instinct was to turn around and leave. But before she could take a step back, he tilted his head slightly, acknowledging her presence. And then, before she could think twice, her feet carried her toward him. Ji-eun, Jin-woo's voice was low, but it held an unreadable tone. She forced herself to smile, as if this meeting meant nothing. Mr. Kang. Her voice came out professional, cold, a poor attempt to mask the storm of emotions brewing inside her. Jin-woo gave a small smirk, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. I'm still not used to that. I prefer when you just call me Jin-woo. She averted her gaze, swallowing hard. This was dangerous, very dangerous. Against all logic, she pulled out a chair and sat across from him. What are you doing here? She asked, trying to sound indifferent. Jin-woo rested his elbows on the table, studying her with quiet intensity. Business. But now, I'd say it's fate. Ji-eun let out a dry chuckle. I don't believe in fate. He leaned in slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. Then how would you explain this? A shiver ran through her. He had always had a way of making her uneasy, of asking questions she didn't have answers for. But she wouldn't let him see the effect he still had on her. Coincidence, nothing more. She tried to sound firm, but the doubt in Jin-woo's expression made it clear he didn't believe her. A heavy silence settled between them, not uncomfortable but thick with something deeper, something unresolved. Jin-woo tapped his fingers against the table as if weighing his next words. Then finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "If it's not fate, then maybe it's unfinished business." Ji-eun frowned. What do you mean by that? He gave a half smile, but there was something unreadable in his eyes. You tell me. His voice was a challenge. Her heart pounded. Something told her this encounter hadn't happened by chance. And worse maybe, just maybe, she wasn't ready to find out what Jin-woo really wanted. A light drizzle fell over Seoul, turning the city lights into a blur of colors reflected on the wet pavement. Ji-eun Park walked unhurriedly, Jin-woo's words still echoing in her mind. If it's not fate, then maybe it's unfinished business. What did he mean by that? Why, after all this time, did he still have the power to unsettle her this way? She entered the office building where she worked, the cold emptiness of the lobby surrounding her. Most people had already gone home for the night. But for Ji-eun, work had always been a refuge. She took the elevator up, quickly tied her hair into a bun, and headed straight for her desk. But as soon as she opened the door, she froze. Jin-woo was there. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, his deep eyes locking onto hers. His dark suit was immaculate, but his expression was unreadable. It wasn't surprising that he knew where to find her. Jin-woo had always known everything about her. You work late. His voice was calm, but there was something observant about his tone. Ji-eun took a deep breath, trying to ignore the way her heart pounded. Not as late as you. What are you doing here, Jin-woo? He held an envelope, tapping his fingers lightly against the paper. "I thought you deserved answers." She frowned. Answers? For years, she had tried to bury the questions that had never been answered, the void left by their abrupt separation. And now he was here, offering the very thing she had feared she wanted. "I don't need answers," she lied, crossing her arms to hide the slight tremor in her hands. Jin-woo gave her a sad smile, as if he knew she wasn't telling the truth. "Even so, I want you to hear them." He placed the envelope on the desk and gently pushed it toward her. Ji-eun hesitated before picking it up, feeling the symbolic weight of the gesture. When she opened it, her eyes scanned the carefully written words. It was a letter, a signed document, something Jin-woo had never had the courage to say out loud. Her eyes widened. Her heartbeat, once steady, quickened. Is this real?" Her voice wavered slightly. Jin-woo held her gaze, unwavering. "I never lied to you, Ji-eun, but I did withhold things, and it cost us dearly." Her breathing was fast. The past she had worked so hard to forget came rushing back with overwhelming force. Everything she thought she knew about their separation, about what had torn them apart, was about to change. "If you open that letter, you'll know everything. But if you'd rather keep living without looking back, I won't stop you." A dilemma, a past that begged to be uncovered, and a secret that would change everything. Ji-eun closed her eyes for a second, knowing that whatever choice she made, there would be no turning back. When she opened them again, her gaze met Jin-woo's once more, and slowly she began to read. Time had seemed to flow differently ever since Ji-eun opened that letter. The days became hazy, the nights sleepless. Jin-woo's words echoed in her mind like a persistent whisper, and although she tried to continue her routine as if nothing had changed, something inside her was collapsing. Yet she was an expert at hiding emotions. She put on her best indifferent expression as she entered the office building that morning. The sharp click of her heels echoed through the silent hall as her eyes carefully scanned the corridors. She wanted to avoid him. She wasn't ready for another confrontation. But fate never gave her easy choices. As she turned the corner toward her office, she saw him. Jin-woo stood in conversation with the head of the finance department, his gaze slightly distracted as if he already knew she was there. Ji-eun's breath faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained control. "Good morning." She passed by them without stopping, keeping her tone neutral. Jin-woo didn't respond immediately, but just as she opened the door to her office, she heard his voice low, filled with meaning. "We need to talk." She pretended not to hear, but throughout the day, Jin-woo made sure she wouldn't ignore him for long. Coincidences multiplied. They ran into each other in the office break room, during unavoidable meetings, in the stolen glances exchanged over documents. Small details that proved they were both acutely aware of each other. And Ji-eun hated to admit that she missed his presence. By the end of the afternoon, when she thought she had finally escaped, she found Jin-woo waiting for her at the building's entrance. The crisp night wind of Seoul ruffled his hair slightly, and his eyes were locked onto her, unreadable. "Are you going to keep pretending I don't exist?" he asked, crossing his arms. Ji-eun lifted her chin, refusing to show any weakness. "I'm not pretending anything. I just have priorities." He smirked, but there was no amusement in it. "Funny, because you've been avoiding every situation where we might talk alone." She sighed, exhausted. She was tired of this game, but at the same time, she knew Jin-woo wouldn't give up easily. "I can't do this, Jin-woo. Not right now." He didn't push. He simply watched her for a moment before murmuring, "I'll give you time, Ji-eun, but don't run forever." A pang tightened in her chest as he walked away, because deep down, she knew running from Jin-woo had never really been an option. In the days that followed, Ji-eun realized her self-control was unraveling. Jin-woo remained close, always present, yet without pressing her. He simply observed, and that was worse than any direct confrontation. One afternoon, while reviewing documents in her office, her phone lit up with a message. "Jin-woo, dinner with me tonight, just to talk." She stared at the screen, her heart pounding. She could ignore it, pretend she hadn't seen it. But before she could overthink, Her fingers were already typing a response. Yerin, where? His reply came quickly. Jinwoo, I'll send you the address in 10 minutes. Thank you for not running this time. Yerin exhaled slowly, feeling foolish. She knew she was stepping into dangerous territory, but part of her wanted to see where this would lead. That night, Yerin found herself standing outside a discreet restaurant, its soft lanterns casting a warm glow. It was cozy, intimate nothing, like the extravagant places Jinwoo used to frequent. Inside, he was already waiting by the window. As she walked in, his gaze found hers instantly. You came. Jinwoo stood as she approached, offering a faint smile. Yerin slipped off her coat and sat across from him. The waiter approached, and Jinwoo ordered red wine, as if already knowing her choice. They exchanged glances, and for a moment, silence spoke louder than words. Why here? She finally asked. Jinwoo twirled his wineglass between his fingers before answering. Because you never liked the lavish places I used to take you. I wanted to see you somewhere you'd feel safe. The answer caught Yerin off guard. He remembered. So you really just want to talk? No games? Her voice held a touch of cynicism, but also something more hope. Jinwoo met her gaze, his expression finally unguarded. No games, Yerin. Not this time. She didn't respond right away. She simply picked up her wineglass, taking a slow sip, allowing herself a moment to breathe before facing the truth she had feared for so long. Maybe, for the first time, they were ready to stop pretending. The night was colder than expected. The sharp wind swept through the silent streets of Seoul, carrying with it an omen that this night would not end like any other. Yerin walked slowly out of the restaurant, her heart still racing after the intense conversation with Jinwoo. No matter how much she had tried to keep her composure, something inside her was fracturing. He followed her onto the sidewalk, his hands tucked into the pockets of his coat, watching her closely. The silence between them was heavy, filled with words left unsaid. Then finally, Jinwoo spoke. You deserve to know the truth, Yerin. She stopped abruptly, clutching her bag against her chest. She wasn't ready to hear this, but at the same time, she needed to. For years, she had wondered what had really happened between them, what Jinwoo had hidden so well. I'm listening. Her voice came out steadier than she had expected. Jinwoo took a deep breath before continuing. The reason I walked away from you back then, it wasn't because I wanted to. His eyes darkened, a mixture of guilt and pain flickering in them. Someone was threatening you, and I couldn't let you get hurt because of me. Yerin's heart pounded. She blinked, trying to process his words. What are you saying, Jinwoo? Who was threatening me? He hesitated for a moment, as if choosing the right words was an internal battle. My father. A shockwave ran through Yerin's entire body. Jinwoo's words echoed in her mind like a thunderclap. She had always known his family was powerful, but she had never imagined that his father had interfered so directly in their relationship. Your father? Her voice wavered. But why? What did I ever do to him? Jinwoo closed his eyes briefly before locking his gaze onto hers again. He thought you were a distraction, that you were pulling me away from the future he had planned for me. He threatened to destroy your career, everything you worked for, if I stayed by your side. Yerin felt bitterness rise in her throat. She didn't know what hurt more, the fact that Jinwoo had walked away without telling her the truth, or the realization that she had been nothing more than an obstacle in someone else's grand plan. And you thought leaving me without an explanation was the best solution? Her voice trembled with emotion, tears threatening to fall. You could have trusted me. Jinwoo took a step closer, his eyes pleading. I tried, but I couldn't take the risk, Yerin. I knew he would follow through with his threat, so I chose to suffer alone rather than put you in danger. She felt her anger mix with sorrow, overflowing inside her. And now? Why are you telling me this now? Jinwoo exhaled, his gaze unwavering. Because I don't want to hide anything from you anymore. Because I don't want you to go another day without knowing the truth. Silence settled between them once again. Yerin's heart was a mess. A part of her wanted to embrace him, to tell him she understood. But another part of her felt betrayed by years of unanswered questions and secrets. She averted her gaze, feeling the tears finally slip down her cheeks. I need time, Jinwoo. He nodded slowly, respecting her pain. I know, but I'll be here, waiting for you to be ready. Ji-eun turned and started walking away, the weight of everything pressing down on her shoulders. Fate had brought them face to face once again, but now she had to decide if there was still space for him in her life. A light drizzle fell over Seoul, turning the city's lights into a blur of colorful reflections on the wet asphalt. Ji-eun wandered aimlessly through the silent streets, her hands trembling inside the pockets of her coat. Jinwoo's words still echoed in her mind, repeating like a broken record. Her heart was at war. A part of her wanted to forgive him, to understand his reasons, but the other part, the one that had suffered for years without explanations, screamed at her to walk away for good. How could she trust him after everything? She stopped in front of the bridge over the Han River. The cold wind tousled her hair as she gazed at the illuminated cityscape. It was there, on that very bridge, where she had once believed her love for Jinwoo was unshakable. But now, everything felt so fragile. Her thoughts were interrupted by hurried footsteps approaching. She knew who it was before she even turned around. Ji-eun. Jinwoo's voice was hesitant, almost a silent plea. She closed her eyes for a moment before facing him. Jinwoo stood there, without an umbrella, drenched from the rain, but his gaze was locked on her, resolute, unwavering. I never wanted to run from you, Ji-eun. I never did. But I made the wrong choices trying to protect you. And if I could go back, I would do everything differently. She felt a sharp ache in her chest. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to forgive him. But it wasn't that simple. Jinwoo, Her voice faltered. Even the air around them felt heavier, thick with emotions too long suppressed. He took a step closer, closing the space between them. I know words aren't enough, but I'm here, and I'll wait as long as it takes. The rain continued to fall, drenching them both, but neither of them cared. Ji-eun felt the tears blend with the raindrops on her skin, her heart pounding with an almost unbearable ache. In that moment, something inside her shattered, and at the same time, something else rebuilt itself. Maybe, just maybe, fate still had something to say about them. In the days that followed, Ji-eun tried to keep her distance. She buried herself in work, ignored Jinwoo's messages, and avoided any place where she might run into him. But it was impossible to erase someone who was so deeply rooted in her story. One night, after an exhausting meeting, she found an envelope on her desk. Her heart pounded when she saw Jinwoo's name on the sender line. With trembling hands, she opened it and pulled out a single sheet of paper. If you need space, I'll give it to you. But before that, let me tell you something I never had the courage to say. You have always been my choice, even when I couldn't choose you. Silent tears fell down her cheeks. Jinwoo had always known how to reach her, even when she had tried to build walls around her heart. That night, Ji-eun made a decision. She picked up her phone and typed a short message. Ji-eun, let's meet tomorrow. I want to hear everything. When she hit send, a strange sense of relief washed over her. She didn't know if the future would bring them back together, but at the very least, she was willing to listen. Maybe this was the first step toward something new, or toward a final goodbye. But either way, it was a decision she needed to make. The next morning rose gray over Seoul, as if the city itself sensed the weight of the decision Ji-eun was about to make. She had been waiting anxiously for this meeting, but now that the moment was near, a tightness in her chest made her hesitate. The cafe Jinwoo had chosen was small and discreet, far from the curious eyes of the city. She arrived before him and picked a table in the corner, trying to steady her breathing as she tapped her fingers lightly against the warm cup of tea. The soft chime of the doorbell rang, and before she even looked up, she knew it was him. Jinwoo entered, his presence commanding as always, but this time, something was different. The exhaustion in his eyes was evident, as if this conversation was just as final for him as it was for her. He approached the table and sat across from her, studying her for a moment before speaking. Thank you for coming. His voice was low, but laden with meaning. Ji-eun nodded slightly. I thought I should hear you out. He exhaled deeply and pulled an envelope from his coat pocket, placing it on the table between them. Inside are all the proofs that I never wanted to leave you. His eyes searched hers. My father manipulated everything. I tried to fight him, but I failed. And because of that, you suffered. Ji-eun stared at the envelope but didn't reach for it. Her heart pounded wildly. For years, she had imagined this moment. But now that she was face to face with the truth, she didn't know how to react. And what do you expect from me now, Jinwoo? Her voice was calm but tinged with pain. That I just forget everything and pretend none of it ever happened. Jinwoo looked away for a moment before answering. Number, I don't want to pressure you. If you decide that leaving me in the past is what's best for you, I'll accept that. But I needed you to know the truth before you made that decision. Silence stretched between them, heavy with emotion. Ji-eun closed her eyes for a moment, trying to listen to her own heart. She could feel the sincerity in his words, but she also knew that wounds from the past didn't heal overnight. Finally, she opened her eyes and picked up the envelope. She ran her fingers over the paper, lost in thought. When she looked up again, her eyes were glassy with unshed tears. I don't know if I can forgive you right now, but maybe one day. Her voice was soft but resolute. I need time. Jinwoo nodded, his expression filled with understanding. I understand, and I'll wait. He stood slowly, lingering for a final glance before walking away. As he left the cafe, Ji-eun felt a tear slip down her cheek. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like she had control over her own story. Maybe this was goodbye. Or maybe, just maybe, it was a new beginning.
You're my eternal